Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and I think to some of you, good evening. Thanks for joining wherever you're calling in from. My name is Phil Shih. I'm the founder and managing director at Structure Research. For those of you who don't know us, we're a industry research firm focused on the infrastructure services sector. I'm calling in here from Toronto, and hopefully some of our team is joined as well. And we are a distributed team across North America and Western Europe and Asia. I think many of you may have known or attended our infrastructure summit, which was due to be held in May and then rescheduled to November this year. Unfortunately, we'll be pushing that to 2021. And that's why we're here on this webinar and why we've created a new webinar series. In place of live events, we're going to be presenting some very short sessions, a series of them over the next several months, to keep you up to date on what we're seeing in the sector and hopefully keep you informed as well. And then, when the world changes, we hope to see you live and we can do this in person. So today, a quick, I promise, less than 30 minutes of your time to focus in on the hyperscale cloud sector. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Schneider and Vertiv, Schneider Electric and Vertiv for helping sponsor and supporting this session. So let's just dive right into it. When we're talking about hyperscale cloud, who are we talking about? This slide hopefully answers that question quite clearly. All the numbers and market share numbers we'll present are aggregates of the revenue generated from these hyperscale platforms. And as you can see, there are 9 of them. I think and we've tiered them here for you just to give you a sense of the differences between the different cloud platforms. I think there's probably no surprise here. With the top 3 in the top, the hyperscale platforms coming out of Asia, primarily China, and then IBM and Oracle. We like to group together just to underscore kind of some of the differences that they demonstrate from the other hyperscale platforms, a little bit of more enterprise focused. So I'm going to present some quick data points from our recent hyperscale cloud market share report for the second quarter of this year, and I think this quarter was extremely interesting because it was the first full quarter that had 100% impact from the pandemic environment, which kind of arguably kicked off to the latter half of the first quarter. So we publish our hyperscale update on a quarterly basis to take account for all the changes that are happening quicker and faster and more quickly. And as the pandemic demonstrates, things can change very dramatically, sometimes when you don't expect. Our current projection, as you can see, is our 5-year CAGR is under 40% now. It's about 35. And as you can see here, we're still projecting the market to reach about 300 billion in 2024. Here's just a quick snapshot of our revenue projection over those years on the left. And as you can see on the right, the year-over-year growth rates. I mentioned coming under 40. This market has grown in the 40 and 50% year-over-year range for quite some time. We're starting to see that moderate just a bit. And as you can see from our projection, we think it's going to moderate down into the mid-30s on a year-over-year basis, still exceptional growth. And we don't see that necessarily spiking up or down too much. We think the market has reached a point of critical mass where the growth rates are going to be a bit more predictable, a bit more steady, even as the scale of the market, as you see from the bar chart, continues to climb. What we've done here is taken some of the quarterly breakouts to give you a little more depth and insight into how these clouds are tracking. Amazon and Alibaba do break out clear quarterly numbers. Azure, you'll see the asterisk there, does not do that, but we feel that we've pretty much found a way to back into it pretty accurately. That's why, and that's explains the presentation of the numbers here. I think the thing to note here, again, I mentioned that the first quarter was somewhat exposed to the pandemic environment, maybe towards the last 6 weeks of that quarter. In the second quarter, full exposure, and as you can see, it was somewhat of a bit of a surprising result. But as you can see in the middle middle of the chart, between the first and second quarters, you'll see the growth rates taper off. Amazon from 32, almost 33 to 29, and Microsoft from 61 to 50. So I think that was the big takeaway from the recent quarter was, despite some of the positive, and we'll get into that in a little more detail, there was definitely a lot of negative impact as well, and then I think that demonstrated in the numbers. But as you know, of course, those growth rates are still very strong in the larger picture, and cloud continues to grow, adoption continues to spread, and the footprint of cloud infrastructure and the user base of public cloud continues to expand across the world. This is just a quick summary from our report. If you would like to see more detail of our tracking, please inquire about the report. But you'll see here just a quick summary on the footprint, as well as some of the regions you can expect to see build out infrastructure in the next, say, 6 to 18 months. I'll quickly point out some geographies of particular interest. You'll see Madrid in Spain mentioned in 3 of those blocks: AWS, Azure, and Google. You'll see Poland, Warsaw, Poland, being built out in, on Google building out there. And I think you'll see some new markets in Asia. Jakarta is another place, and as well as Osaka continues to see hyperscale cloud development. And just of note as well, there are some names out of the Middle East, and I think we'll see more activity there as well. I think what's interesting is especially outside a country as large like the United States, in many countries around the world, the hyperscale market is revolved around one major metro. But I think as you see from this graphic here, many markets are starting to reach that point of scale, that critical mass, where you'll have a second market emerge in Japan, in Australia, here in Canada, and South Korea. We're seeing a second hyperscale market emerge, and I think that speaks to not just the growth, the overall growth in the market, but also the desire for infrastructure. The importance of latency and performance, the desire to get closer to end users, as well as the importance of building kind of failover and DR scenarios, and that's what's driving a lot of this development. So I want to revert back quickly, make a few quick comments on the pandemic environment. I think that's kind of the big elephant in the room, something that you simply can't ignore. And I think that like with many things in life and in business and technology, they're both something as big, an event as big as this has created a combination, both headwinds and tailwinds. And I think the most striking thing is that is how these headwinds and tailwinds are creating positive and negative impacts on specific verticals, and that translates to how these hyperscale platforms are able to grow and how infrastructure consumption is tracking. I think it's probably no secret here, but worth just quickly looking over some of the sectors that have seen a positive impact. Obviously, things like e-commerce, streaming media. Gaming has been a big one. Telemedicine is one that may be perhaps a little overlooked, but extremely significant. And then, of course, the negative, I think, has all hit us, in one way or another. Any of the industries and verticals related to travel, hospitality, live entertainment, sporting events, obviously restaurants and the small business sector. So taken together, there's just so many different kind of directions in which this impact is hit. I mean, when it comes to, obviously, with more people at home, the content consumption is kind of one dynamic where you're seeing, just more people logging on to platforms that run on hyperscale clouds, and those clouds, of course, consume more space and power and network capacity, and that translates to a positive impact for the supporting infrastructure, wholesale co-location, that sort of. So I won't belabor all these dynamics. I think that most of you are on top of this and have well seen what's going on there. I just want to quickly summary. I think that while there's both positive and negative, and I think that I think probably as I mentioned with the second quarter numbers, there may have been a little bit, the negative impact may have been stronger than some of us anticipated. The sector is, hyperscale cloud is still growing. It may not grow as fast as some of these weaker parts of the economy deal with this new environment and take some time to recover. But overall, I think there's some striking parallels to for those of you who were in the sector 10 years ago, 12 years ago, back in the 0809 financial crisis. Internet infrastructure did well. Cloud consumption just continued to grow during that period. There was not as much negative impact, and I think that had a lot to do with just the underlying value proposition of cloud. And I think you're seeing the same dynamic happen today. Internet infrastructure is critical. I think it's top of mind for decision makers. Organizations have been scrambling and trying to deal with this new environment, and that's accelerated a lot of the initiatives and projects and transformation efforts to get to use outsourcing to become more efficient, to deal with more distributed workforces, and that's put the service provider in the primary position. I think that organizations often will turn to their service providers for advisory, for help, for consulting, and that's really I think driven and continues to drive a lot of the consumption and growth, and which is offset a lot of the weakness from verticals. Just a quick note on that. I think what's an interesting metric that you're starting to see, at least coming out of the publicly listed data center operators, is that many of them on their earnings calls are disclosing kind of a vertical exposure number. So, for example, anywhere a number, say 5%, 5% of their revenue being exposed to some of those weaker or highly impacted verticals. And so, generally in our tracking, we have not seen anything that's over 10%. It tends to be, for a lot of the operators, something that's in the mid single digits. So I want to just delve a little bit into kind of the dynamics of growth. I think it's definitely the way hyperscale cloud is growing these days is different from the early days of the sector. And I think the main way it has changed is that so there's, I think, two things: existing customer growth. So if you take the 80-20 rule, and these are not hard and fast numbers, just FYI, these are meant to be guidelines. But existing customers increasingly drive growth rather than, I think in the early days, new customer growth was driven a lot by just new customers, users coming to cloud, moving a workload or two, and in some cases building a business on cloud. But as this sector has matured, it's more reliant on existing customers to drive the growth. And how do existing customers grow? One, obviously they consume more raw and core infrastructure, and two, they consume more value or buy more value-added services on top of that infrastructure. And that is the other kind of big driver that we're seeing these days. Core infrastructure is still the foundation of the revenue they contribute to a hyperscale cloud, but increasingly they're consuming additional services. And so you see this dynamic of both existing customers driving growth and then the value add being what they're consuming to drive that. And I think it's pretty clear, obviously, people are buying security services, they're backing up, they're buying R, but a big driver and a very, margin-friendly driver for the hyperscale platforms is in the area of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and analytics. These tools that the hyperscale platforms are building at a frantic pace are really driving value for end users. And with that kind of happens in unison, in tandem with the growth of data on these platforms. And so you're not going to be able to use these tools if you don't have data to analyze and to make sense of and to drive value from. And so you're seeing both two things happen. One, end users, organizations are moving more of their data to cloud platforms, driving growth in order, driving the growth of the underlying platform. And they're doing this so that they can take advantage of the these amazing tool sets and this innovation that is being created for them. And of course, the hyperscale platforms are making it easier for them to move, whether it be to move data to the cloud, whether that be easier software-based tools or even physical things like you've seen AWS with Snowball. And I think you saw a couple of years back, they even rolled a tractor trailer on stage where they could literally roll that, I guess drive that tractor trailer to a premise and physically transport data back to Amazon's premises and data centers, and then upload that to these cloud platforms. So very much an interesting development that I think is going to drive this next phase of growth in hyperscale. So I just want to jump into some of the different, some quick, what I think are interesting and both interesting and significant product developments. I think one, obviously these silos, these hyperscale platforms are kind of silos. They live at, they're single platforms, and often organizations have to choose between, them to when they make a bet on cloud. But you're starting to see some interoperability as well, and I think this development, I think last year was really interesting, where Oracle and Microsoft are now working together to make their cloud platforms interoperable. So you can run, say, your database on Oracle's cloud while taking advantage of certain Microsoft tools and features. And this is also translated into the underlying data center world, where these clouds are starting to, because of the interoperability needs when it comes to latency and performance, you're seeing them reside very closely, often on the same data center campus. Obviously, there's just a ton of innovation and product development happening. I just wanted to highlight a few, not to say that that Oracle, some of the products they are building are not being built by others, but I think what's interesting in terms on the product development side, what has been really interesting is the creation of new deployment form factors and deployment models. So Oracle Cloud came out with has a new bare metal server version of its cloud, and recently rolled out an interesting new deployment model, I think they call the private data center, where they can come onto your on-premise data center and create basically a section, a cordoned off area data center within a data center that's enabled by hardware and software that runs basically a replica of the Oracle Cloud on-premise. Google's been doing similar things, creating also rolling out a bare metal version of their cloud infrastructure platform, rolling out an interconnect capability and a specialized infrastructure service, a server that's optimized and oriented to gaming. And I think that's a pretty interesting development for some of the other clouds as well, where you're starting to see a certain amount of verticalization or specialization in the cloud services themselves. So they're optimizing and tailoring them for specific verticals. Just to highlight a few that we've tracked and come across in this last year, Microsoft Azure with the healthcare oriented cloud, and I think many of you may have caught the IBM building a cloud infrastructure service that's geared to the needs and requirements of financial service sector users. So that was just a quick snapshot of what's going on in products. I think another interesting development in the hyperscale world, it's clearly become a global business. And I think, as you saw from the footprint summary, as well as the expansions that are moving to emerging markets in many regions, different regions around the world. Another, I think, development that is in its early phases is regionalization of these cloud platforms. So I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Gaia X initiative coming out of Europe is trying to create a alternative cloud as certain regions in the world get a little antsy or a little concerned with the fact that so much data is being stored on hyperscale platforms that are run by companies that reside in a single country, in the United States primarily, and on the other side in China. with some of the other China-based clouds. So this is, this is happened for these kinds of initiatives have happened before. It's difficult to say how it'll progress, but it's important to note, I think, that while cloud is meant to be a global platform, it's meant to be uniform in so many ways. That's how you get the scale and efficiency. But at the same time, there are going to be regional concerns, and that could drive certain, certain new models or alternatives. And I think it'll be interesting to follow, especially as as the kind of companies that are involved with that initiative try to figure out how to respond. Yeah, and I think probably already touched on this, but I think another really interesting development and important development is that organizations, I mentioned, have typically to make a single bet. Interoperability is one step towards making dual cloud usage a bit easier. But organizations are also just saying, hey, listen, we're going to hedge our bets a bit, or we like the tools, the feature sets, maybe the geographic footprint of different of another cloud, and so or maybe the underlying use case makes sense on this cloud versus that one, and so we're seeing more the early stages of more multi-cloud adoption in the marketplace. So hopefully that's a useful segue to, I want to touch just quickly before we conclude on what's going on the service provider side, on the managed third-party cloud side. There is definitely an ecosystem being created around Hyperscale Cloud. I think touched on how the underlying infrastructure has heavily impacted the data center game and created the hyperscale data center market. On the service provider, MSP, and managed services side, you're definitely seeing this model become validated as this market continues to grow. More of the providers are supporting multiple clouds as end users demand support for multiple clouds. Overall, we're seeing uptake increase. We're seeing more service providers become consultative in the way they engage customers, offer more professional services around their core infrastructure hosting and infrastructure management services. In general, it's just become a really important conversation starter when companies are going to their service providers asking about co-location, private cloud, managed hosting. Hey, what is your public cloud strategy? And MSPs are increasingly forced to have, compelled to have a response, a strategy, a roadmap for that. And as these products and services, as these offerings, these managed third-party cloud offerings are being built out, I think you see a generation of new companies being built. You're seeing established companies create this product line, and you're also seeing strategic M&A from some of the larger consulting shops who are also getting into this game in a big way. And I think that's also, again, a validation of the overall opportunity, but also what's happening on the ground. Enterprises, mid-tier organizations are going to their outsourcing and managed services partners and asking for help on cloud, strategizing about cloud. So this is just a quick summary of kind of that hopefully articulates what's happening on the hyperscale cloud side and how that's impacting the ecosystem and forcing and impacting service providers in how they build out their products and services. Managed third-party cloud line, we believe, will be a significant part of the portfolio as we go forward. You're going to see organizations in this environment as more infrastructure moves to cloud continue to get on this bandwagon while they create other areas of specialization. Still traditional services in mixed service portfolios, tailoring services for vertical markets, focusing on specific regions, and then of course trying to tie in the on-premise world. And just to further underscore that, I think we're seeing on the service provider side, as the hyperscale cloud continues to grow, some service providers not just creating managed cloud services, but running their entire organizations and going asset light. And you'll see here in this snapshot a number of service providers, particularly in the SMB space, running moving most of their data center and hosted infrastructure to a public cloud platform, taking advantage of the scale, the cost efficiency, the tools and innovation, and focusing in on other areas of their business. So before, I think we're right up to time. I'm just going to take a quick glance here. And this, obviously this session has been about 9 companies that make up the hyperscale cloud market. But I did want to just quickly focus in on what Amazon is doing with Lightsail and what other parts of the market are doing. I think it's important to keep in mind that it's not a, hyperscale cloud is not necessarily a monolith. There's certainly a variety in different types of users, and as well as the infrastructure services they consume, not just the underlying service itself, but the way they consume it. And this has maintained an extremely dynamic ecosystem where you have other providers that can serve different types of needs. The value in that market, I think, is validated by what Amazon has done with Lightsail, which is basically a MB Cloud or VPS hosting service, similar to some of the other logos you see here. So that'll be a market that will continue to develop and evolve, but it's important to recognize that there are other parts of the space still driving value and growth. Just a quick summary of where we are. That's my contact information. And because I'm right up the clock, I'll just take a quick glance to see if there's a quick question or two. But if you have follow-up questions, feel free to send an email or call. And I hope to see you soon on another webinar. So let me just quickly. I think just a quick question around the recording and slides. The recording will be available. We have a YouTube channel. Just if you search Structure Research channel, I think you'll find it where you see some of our recent webinars. The slides will not be shared, but if you're looking for more information about the underlying data and reports, please let us know. We can send an executive summary. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be having another session same time on Thursday. So hope to speak to you then. Bye now.